Okay. Let me see if I got anything to say here. Yeah, no, this is pretty good. It's not bad. The reading is from Genesis, the 3rd chapter, about 7 verses right in the middle of it. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Then the Lord God called to Adam and said to him, "Where are you?" And Adam said, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." And God said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you that you should not eat?" And the man said, "The woman you gave to be with me, she gave me some of the tree, and I ate." And the Lord said to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" And the woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." The Lord said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle, and more than every beast of the field. And on your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life." Genesis stories rock. And you know, I don't know if you've ever thought of the book of Genesis as a storybook, but I want to tell you that it is. You know, you can take, I don't know how many people study, or regardless of the depth of study that you do of the Bible, or even just a cursory reading of the Bible, I would say over 99% of the people, if you ask, what is the first sentence in the book of Genesis, would know that right away because it's familiar to us. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. But I would venture to also say, if you ask the people, what's the last sentence in Genesis, I believe the same percentage or more would not know that because it's not that familiar to us. But the last sentence in the book of Genesis, in the storybook of Genesis, says, "They embalmed him and placed him in a coffin in Egypt." And it's about Joseph. It's about that marvelous story of Joseph and his brothers. So you have creation and a finality. A beginning and the end. You have sorry. You have Alpha and Omega. And in between of that is some of the most marvelous story that you can imagine all through the book of Genesis. And I consider this chapter 3 to be in that category. The Lord God is prevalent to an extreme extent in all of the stories. The Lord God, we're told, was almighty, or they say everlasting. Sometimes they say unchanging. Before and after creation, God is a part of the story. This chapter actually begins with a brief description of what they call the serpent. So the serpent is the most cunning of all beings, more cunning than all of the beasts of the field and the sea and the sky that the Lord God has created. And what his aim is to tempt that woman into believing that God did not mean what he said when he said, "I don't want you to eat from this tree that's in the garden, this tree of the knowledge of good and evil." God won't punish you for that. And besides, it'll make you just like God. You'll know the difference between right and wrong. You'll know the difference between good and bad. You can discern that for yourself between functional and dysfunctional. And so you'll know, and apparently from what we know about the narrative in the foregoing chapter, his temptation of her was successful because she decided to believe that and to eat of the tree. So now we know that the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil apparently works and has that effect on human beings. Now this scene that we have in this passage that we read is in the garden. It's in a brand new garden. All of creation is brand new. The animals are brand new. The humans are brand new. The garden is brand new, and God made this specifically because of what he wanted to have a place in the east where he caused trees and shrubs and vines to come up out of the ground and immediately be mature. Not like you gotta wait weeks and months and years to see the little leaf come up. It's all mature and all bearing now, just like the humans. The humans were created mature, adults. Well, I don't know that much about mature, but they were put into the idea of adults. You ever thought about what it might be like if you were created as an adult, instead of going through that helpless young stage where they have to feed you and you gotta be given Gerber's strain prunes whether you ask for it or not, and all this stuff about growing up. You ever thought what that would be? I kind of think we like it the other way ourselves, that we have to come up through that, even kindergarten and school buses and stuff. And so, but you get this notion that God is very pleased, extremely satisfied with his creation, and the beasts and the animals and everything. And maybe especially this garden, which he created here. Uh-oh, oh man, come on man, I can't do this. Strictly water. That God created in the east, and it's called Eden. Eden is a Hebrew word which means delight. So in the cool of the day, and not much is happening like it did last week, God just casually wants to take a stroll into the garden and see this perfect thing that he has created, and see the majesty of the humans that are there, and smell maybe the blossoms and enjoy the cool of the evening, and then maybe have a word or two with the humans. So he said, Adam, where are you? And I think Adam must have said something like, you know, I was thinking I might have dinner a little bit later on, but I don't have anything to wear. And God says, who told you you don't have anything to wear? Now that's got to be the simplest question that you'll ever find in all of the Holy Writ, anywhere and anytime. The population of the world in the meantime is 2. So if you ask who did anything, you'll know the answer. But God in his grace didn't push him for an answer, but part B of this question was maybe another scene entirely, you know. He said, did you eat of that tree that I expressly told you not to? You think God already knew that? Yeah. In fact, we even know it, don't we? Adam says, well, you know, that woman that you made for me, she took something off of the tree, and she ate it, and then she gave it to me, and I ate it. So to the woman, God says, what is this that you have done? And she said, well, that serpent told me that it would be okay, and that you wouldn't mind if I do it. So we know already, in a lot of ways, that the fruit of the tree of knowledge works. It works on works on humans and plants, that human nature in there, where if you're confronted with something you did by somebody in authority, your mind works rapidly to think of somebody else to blame. And so that's what happened. We know it works. And God spoke to the serpent. We'll say more about that in a minute. And told him, okay, because you've done all this, you're going to be cursed. So his punishment was worse than any of it. You're going to be cursed. You're going to crawl on the ground and eat dust for all of eternity. And it's very clear that God wasn't really angry like we may see him be angry, or sometimes like we as a parent might have been angry when somebody disobeyed us. But he was really disappointed. And so he told the humans, okay, there's going to be some punishment about this, but that's okay. So we'll work through this. Everything that's going on now is brand new, and there's just still a lot of stuff that has to be worked out, and we'll take care of all the kinks and get things done, and just go along as best we can. This entire chapter is very important to show us for all times the importance of the relationship with the Creator God and the humans and the animals, which so many of our scholars refer to as inferior beings. I sort of have an issue with referring to animals as inferior beings. And I'm sure you do too, especially if you've had pets like we have, or maybe you see David Attenborough's documentary on the remarkable animals of the world and stuff. So let's don't call them inferior beings. As a matter of fact, if you ever do any driving, and all of you do, some of our own species in that other car can sometimes be referred to as inferior beings. Their ancestors might not be quite what we, anyway, that would have been well, I must tell you that it pains me to say that what is referred to as the serpent in this narrative, out of necessity, has to be just about a major character in this whole narrative. We can't ignore his influence on what's going on here. The serpent is incapable of judicial examination as the humans were. In fact, probably you noticed in that passage that God didn't enter into dialogue at all with the serpent. He didn't ask him any questions, didn't ask him to account for himself at all, just meted out the punishment. The reason that he didn't dialogue with the serpent is that it ain't a serpent at all. Serpents can't talk. What we have here is what scholars refer to as the evil one. We could call him the devil. We could call him Satan. In some cases, we could call him Uriah Heep. We know from what the scholars and the ancient church fathers told us that the evil one existed into heaven, and at one point he was cast out of heaven with his angels. We are never told anything specific that they did to get cast out, and frankly, I don't care, and maybe you don't either. I think if they could tell me something that he did that allowed him to be into heaven in the first place, I might listen to that. But I don't care that he got cast out of heaven, and I don't know what he's been doing all that time when there wasn't an earth and sky and sea and universe. Maybe hanging around up in, what do you call it, the ether? Maybe he's hanging around up in the ether. And then he sees God making this creation that God did all of last week. Just enormous amount of creation every day. And the devil decides he's going to get involved now. And especially when God made humans and made them adult already with the ability to converse, to understand the words that you say and speak back to you already. Maybe their minds are still infantile for a while, but they are in possession of the ability to converse with you, listen to you, and ostensibly to agree to what you tell them to do. So he, the evil one, is so jealous of God's creation, and especially with this human with which you can interact. He makes it his lifelong ambition to come between them and the God that created them. That he's going to do everything in his power to tempt them to not be obedient and to try to destroy their relationship with God. And so we know, based on some of the other things that we read and what we recalled in the foregoing chapter, that he was able to do that in this case, that his temptation of them was successful. He made himself in the image of a serpent. The church fathers always used to like to talk about that kind of thing, that he had this power. His power was very short of what God's power is. He could not create something into being. He could not actually coerce somebody into doing it. He could only make them think that that's what they want to do, and he does it by becoming attractive to them. He's able to turn himself into some other kind of a being and to speak to them very softly and very convincingly and looking good, makes himself look good. You know, you may see, well, that doesn't make sense to take on the image of a serpent. But you know, during those days, during the original times, the serpent wasn't always slithering on the ground. The serpent, half of the serpent's body was upright, you know, and hey, that's not bad. It's upright, and they look good. And I don't know, even if you won't admit it, there are a lot of snakes that we see today that are beautiful. You're not going to, some of you are not going to agree with that. But yeah, he made himself look good and attractive and a pleasing voice. And certainly that makes sense. If anybody is trying to tempt you into buying something like a piece of furniture or other things, or God forbid, hey, should I go there or not? A timeshare ownership. They want to make themselves look good. They're well groomed and well dressed, and it makes you stop and listen to them. So it makes sense that you would listen to somebody who looks good and sounds good, and they're able to maybe sway you that way, or either, you know, agree to that wholeheartedly. Well, we know that this same evil one has shown up in scriptures later on, tempting people. I have a notion that he was present with Cain when Cain sort of turned bad, you know. It was the evil one that made Cain hate his brother as long as he was able. I've been waiting a long time to say that. And I got more groans than I think I should. But also with Job. But a notable time of the evil one being present to tempt somebody is with the just baptized Jesus. When Jesus is just baptized and then he goes off to be alone, Satan goes with him, the devil goes with him, and he tempts him. And he keeps trying, and this is what I was talking about a while ago. He's not able really to create anything in Jesus. He's just hoping to convince Jesus that he will agree to do something, to worship me or to agree to this, but he's not, and he's very frustrated. The whole incredible time that he's trying to do that, he's just not able, and he's frustrated. And there's a real ominous sentence at the end of that passage that says, "Then the devil, frustrated, left him to return at an opportune time." And that's just terrible for us to think that even though successful, he goes away and will return at an opportune time. I wish I could tell you that he was banished into oblivion, but I can't. I wish I could tell you that happened on that first week after creation, when the population of the world was 2, that he was banished, but I can't do that. He was not. He is always still there. And his purpose, I guess, is always to still try to tempt us into something. He may not make himself present in that image, but there's that voice that comes to us, It's okay, go ahead and do that. They won't miss that $10. It's all right, go ahead and sleep late. You don't need to go to church today. So there's always this tempting of you, and he's going to be there. And that makes it really incumbent upon us to live our Christian principles and doctrine at all times, to study, to show ourselves a Christian worker that need not be ashamed, and that will be subject to the wishes of the Lord God, our Creator, to wear our theology on our sleeve and get that stamp of approval from the Lord God, our Creator. And come thou, Almighty King.